ahead and get started. So this is a topic about a very specific market. A microbusiness is generally defined as a business with 9 or fewer employees. And a lot of times that's just, one person involved in the business. And so every challenge that you have with microbusinesses, you also have a parallel in a larger corporation or company, but they tend to be compressed. So I don't like to look at it as problems unless it's like a math problem, like an algebra problem that's 16 pages long and it's solvable. But anyway, so it's more like the challenges and the things that you can solve that take the small picture and that feed back to the big picture and harm or have an effect on the big picture. And I first thought of this topic when I was contacted by a couple ladies that were starting a marketing company in Missoula, and they were marketers, not web developers, and they needed a web developer because a lot of their projects had a web development component. And we talked and we agreed on an hourly price for my work, and I gave them a decent discount for thinking that there were going to be a lot of projects. And we kept getting into the weeds, and it was like, what's going on here? Why aren't we communicating? And I found out that we had a cultural problem. They had a totally different expectation of what web development was than I did because they'd come out of the corporate world. And in a large corporate setting, what happens is you get paid, but somebody else takes the brunt of doing the proposal process, right? So the people building the proposal don't go without a paycheck. But somebody goes without a paycheck or without profit, actually, if that proposal isn't accepted, right? So there is a loss. So they're thinking that I'm part of I will take a loss for 40 hours of work as we redo the PowerPoint and redo the PowerPoint and redo the PowerPoint and have another meeting with the client, and I'm thinking, these are all billable hours, right? I'm the tech guy. I'm the tech guy. I get paid for my hours. Because every single time we sat down and had a meeting, every time I helped them with the PowerPoint, every time I explained to them how shopping carts work, I was considering my hours as consulting time. I was training them on something that they should know. Now, they were good, honest people. They were very nice to work with, but it really hit them in an unexpected pocketbook that they had to pay me for my consulting time. So anyway, that's made me realize that, you're in the corporate job and you're a little wheel or little cog in this great big wheel, and the world would be so wonderful if you could make your own schedule and not deal with corporate politics, and everything would be wonderful. Right? Well, it's different. All right, so we're going to look at 5 interconnected topics that have to do with being a consultant or a web developer for microbusinesses. Time is different than it is in the corporate world. Your schedule is different. There is a diversity of technologies. These are the technologies we work in. You learn this programming language, or this platform, or this whatever, and you got it. And all of your projects are going to fit into that bucket. There is none of that. Graphic artists, you will run into some very interesting issue with graphic artists because your clients may have their own graphic artist, who knows nothing about web development, only knows print. Attorneys are your problem now. There are no corporate attorneys to cover you. So the attorney is good, bad, and the ugly. And are you actually going to get a paycheck is another issue. And your client should be your teammates, and that's what you need to work on, is making that happen. So here's where I ran into the problems with the time expectations with the ladies that came from corporate. I have a meeting with a client, I review their site, and we get to work. I don't do a PowerPoint presentation. I bring their site up. I bring all the pieces up that they need to their site. We look at, we identify the structures, we identify security, we identify all of that. And next week, I'm working on the site. Unless there's some mitigating things like they don't know what their passwords are and things like that, or somebody else has control of the resources. So you need to, if you're working with micro businesses, these ladies actually lost the client. Because I would sit in a meeting and I would say, yeah, I can take care of that. It was a Magento shopping cart site, and the shopping cart was so out of date, you couldn't update it. You had to start over with new software because of some of the extensions that were connected to it, couldn't be updated. And so I said, yeah, you know, there's things we can do. I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you, and this for you, and I expect it to start next week. And they go, whoa, wait, we don't have a signed contract. We don't have an agreement. We don't. It's like, okay, it's this much per hour. He agreed he wanted the work done. Okay, we're done, right? Okay, I'm going to get to work. And so for 5 months, we're sitting with never-ending rounds of PowerPoint. So if you're coming from corporate, you have to think a little different, because that client really is expecting you to get right to work. And so now I was not going to give them 40 hours of free consulting. The first hour is free just to figure out where we're at, but not after that. And I always document. I'm the documentation queen. Always make a document and have a charge for that time. Charge for that time, because you are putting what you know into it. And you know, a lot of your clients can't deal with extensive documentation systems, the base camps, all of that kind of thing. They don't. Google Docs is about as deep as a lot of your clients can handle. I have clients who I've walked through getting into their Google Doc 5 times, and they still can't get into their Google Doc all by themselves. So anyway, I say, I will download a copy and send it to you by email. So that's, you know, some time issues. It's more compressed. Usually a micro business expects that you can build a website for them in 2 weeks. All right, technology surprises. Every project is a technology surprise for me. I never know what I'm going to run into. You have to decide, if you're going to be a consultant and work with micro businesses, which technologies will you work with and which ones won't you? I don't do .NET. I've made that decision that I'm not going to learn that interface, the .NET interface. So a friend of mine, a business acquaintance, Nora, please, I need my site changed. I'm going to have it rewritten, but until then I can't make any changes. Jan, that's .NET. I don't do .NET. Nora, you're the only person I can trust. Okay, I'm still not going to do .NET. I just took all their files and tracked it through from file to file to file to file and found out where I had to make the changes, and I made the changes in the file. Because once you can code, right? If you can get through it that way. So, what are some other situations you might run into? I met these 2 ladies last fall, different ladies, and they're geologists. They're not programmers, they're geologists. But one of the ladies had actually taught herself HTML and CSS. And when I took a look at the pages, the individual pages, through the browser before I had access to the back end, it's like, wow. This is amazing. You taught yourself how to do this? I mean, it's an old style site, but it's totally functional, does a great job. This is great, yes. We can make this site responsive. You know enough CSS that we can do this together. And then I looked at the back end. Every page was in its own folder and had its own CSS file. It was like, well, there's a mistake I've never seen before, right? And that's just it. You know, people go, where do you get these situations? Well, they just kind of knock on my door, call me on the phone, send me a Facebook message. And they were really nice ladies, and I've helped them and I've taught them. You have one style sheet for a site your size, and she'd also named every style sheet the same. So it looked like it was referring to the same style sheet, and since it was in every folder, it worked, right? Except that she'd made a few changes here and a few changes there to some of them, and we weren't sure where the changes were. So what happens if I take all those pages and move them into more logical folders? All the links break. Now, she could get a system, a program that would fix all the links, right? No, she's doing it in a text editor. So we have to manually, in order to show her how to do it, change thousands and thousands of links because it's a geology rock kind of a site. And so all those links have to be changed manually. I mean, I could have said, okay, we're going to run this through software and do it, but she wasn't interested in buying software to do it, and she wanted to learn how to do it. So it's inefficient, and every page, the banner was not in a file that it was referring to. Every page was starting over from scratch. So you made a change on one page, the old static site model. So, I've slowly been suggesting that maybe there's systems that are more efficient, and I'm sure they'll find that out sooner or later, but for right now, we're having some good HTML and CSS lessons. All right, so that one, for me, I said, okay, I'm going to help you where you're at, and I'm going to hope to wean you onto other systems. The next one, no. This guy wanted some change in his shopping cart system. And he said, well, it's all running through authorize.net. We're not storing any credit card data locally. It's all running through authorize.net and PayPal. Okay, take it at face value and then check, right? So I checked, and he had two tables in his database storing credit card information. Oops. And it was identical data. I don't know who built that database, but they need to be on Wonder Bread and water for about a year. The database didn't even make any sense. And, so needless to say, the FBI got involved because all the credit card information was compromised, and they're calling me and asking questions. And, well, did you build the system? I would never make a database structure that bad. Yeah. But they were really nice, and the guy gave them access for me to give them information without a court order and the whole bit. So, that worked out, except that he never really understood what happened. And when I tried to institute tighter security on the new system, they're breaking all the security practices that I suggested. So needless to say, that is not a good client for me. You have to decide. The one thing I'll fire a client for pronto is not following security practices. And so, what's your tolerance of that with a microbusiness? Remember, these guys are working 40, 80, 120 hours a week, right? They're mentally exhausted, and they can get grumpy on you. And so, you have to have some patience. This person was very abusive verbally, and I finally, this isn't going to work. I will only work with you if I work through your employee, and I won't talk to you. I told them, I will not talk to you. That didn't work, and so that project is done. I got their site up and running in a way that they could work with, and we're done. So here's another one. What about if it's in a technology that you are comfortable with working in, and you find that a previous developer used the worst possible practices? Are you going to say, we have to start over? At what point are you going to say, we have to start over? Remember, there is no corporate policy here where you've had a team reviewing software, right? And saying, this is the ideal situation. Every situation's different. And how much disruption am I going to make to that business if I tell them they have to start over? How much money have they already put into their system? Small business, most small businesses don't have a lot of, leeway for throwing in another $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 into a system. They're depending on you for good advice. What if the system is clunky but not insecure? What if it slows their website down? How much can it slow their website down and you're still going to say you don't have to rebuild? How much are you going to say, this should be rebuilt, but I understand right now financially you can't afford it. Let's use this system for a certain period of time, but let's plan and save for a rebuild in the future. So they're depending on you because their business could get hurt really bad if you're not careful. Here's an example of a WordPress site. And this came out of the Aveda theme, which is a platform theme. And it's a platform because it has very extensive builders. I'm going to scroll down here. See, we still aren't there. This is in the head tag. Okay, well, after you get through all the other stuff, there are 2,000 lines of CSS. Somewhere, right there. Okay, now you saw I scrolled past all this other stuff, right? All right. Okay, now we start at 2,000 lines of internal CSS styles. Now, how did that happen? I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm going, how could any developer of something as extensive as a platform theme do something like this? I mean, how did this even get there? Is this in the database? So you can have a platform that's really popular, like WordPress, right? And somebody does something, and so WordPress inherently has its own database problems, which I'm not going to go into. But it's really popular, people know how to use it, we've got staff that can go in there and change it, and if I have to retrain them, they're going to say, we don't want you to work on the project, right? Because their staff is already swamped. So I could say, let's switch the theme, or let's keep it for a while. They understand that that theme's not efficient. That happens not because of that, the dashboard precisely. Usually what happens in a WordPress dashboard is whatever you put in the dashboard side goes into a database. And so a lot of these sites have CSS stored in the database and CSS stored in the files, which is all kinds of fun. But this one, the PHP, creates CSS dynamically. So now I've got 3 places to look for the styles, the rules and whatnot. I've got to look in the files, I've got to look in the database, and I've got to look at lines and lines and lines and lines of PHP that's creating CSS on the fly. And that's what this is. And so if I tell my client, okay, so what's happening here is that your browser will hold on to the CSS files to make your site load faster. I try to explain that and their eyes roll in the back of their heads. Right? They don't want to hear about that, but it is a problem. And that's why one of the biggest group of clients that I get is fixing websites that somebody who only knows how to work in the dashboard and install themes has built. That's my biggest client set, is those, because it gets to a point where they can't change it through the dashboard anymore. It doesn't matter how well they've learned how to use that builder. And then I have to go through this wonderful process of trying to figure out where's the code. All right. The ugly is when you have a client that has a free attorney. Nonprofits. There's a lot of developers that won't work for nonprofits because of this. I keep saying this on LinkedIn groups. Because if they have an attorney on their board, then they ask you for a lot of extra work, and you have project overruns, and that attorney will make your life miserable. At that point, you have a decision to make. Even if you have all the specs of the project lined up, I'm going to train one person, they get 10 hours of training, and they expect you to train 3 people with 30 hours of training because they're computer illiterate. That attorney can make your life so miserable. Are you going to pay to fight them? Are you going to take the time to fight them? Are you going to take the emotional energy away from other clients to fight them? It's something you need to think about ahead of time, not when it's happening. Because I was so shocked that there's dishonest people in this world. Come on, the world's full of good people, right? We're all one happy family. I had never met any group, organization that would do that to somebody. I was just shocked, and I was talking to this other lady who's on a lot of boards and nonprofits. She said sometimes nonprofits are their own worst enemies because they feel that they are entitled and they can treat contractors that way. And I said, so I'm not the only one that's had this happen? Apparently not. So anyway, even if you have a contract, even if you have 20 pages of specs where everything's lined out, if they have a pro bono attorney, it doesn't cost them anything to try to, sue you or threaten to sue you or whatever. Business processes are your responsibility. There is no billing department. Oh, well, you are. There is no compliance department. Oh, well, you are. There is nobody else to do these tasks for you, and these tasks will take away from your billable hours. Keeping track, which hours are billable, which hours aren't. Somebody calls you, you're in the middle of a project, somebody calls you, you go off, you spend a half hour working on their project. Did you record that? Oops. No, you can't charge that time to the person you're working on before, right? How are you going to deal with those things? Do you know how QuickBooks works? Do you know what an asset is, what a liability is? How are you going to fill out your taxes at the end of the year? Do you know how to fill out your taxes, or do you have a tax person? Do you know what documents they need? Those are the kinds of things if you're a contractor. You know what? Whether you need a business license. I'm not positive whether I need a business license in the city of Missoula or not. I've heard both sides, so I get one. I have an independent contractor exemption that, oops, I let lapse. There's an economic development organization that wants me to work for their clients. Guess what? I let my business, my independent contractor, lapse because nobody's asked me for it for so long, right? I started the paperwork and realized I didn't have any. You have to send all these little documents that prove that you're a business. And so I had to get my business cards reprinted. So while I was waiting for my business cards, I forgot about it. It's still in a folder, partly filled out, right? I gotta do that. Do you even know what that is? Do you know where to get that? Did you know that you can sign up with the state of Montana for an account? And you can go to one place and look at all this stuff. How are you gonna bill? You're gonna have to figure out pricing strategies. Are you gonna bill with the average developer in Missoula who makes between $50 and $60 an hour? Are you gonna go for more normal market rates, closer to $100 an hour? What are you gonna do when they say, well, I can't afford that? How much are you gonna discount it? Who are you gonna discount it for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of this stuff doesn't give you any billable hours, and yet you'll spend hours and hours and hours doing it. Okay, clients, that's Betty. Betty has Usher syndrome. She's born deaf and she has tunnel vision. She can see her computer like this. This is all she can see on her computer screen. She's in New Hampshire. I trained her how to do their family website, their family business website by chat. It's so unexpected what people will be when you meet them. I was speaking at a conference for woodworkers in Vermont, New Hampshire, I don't remember, someplace. Her sister came and she goes, would you work with my sister Betty? She's deaf. And I go, well, I'm in Montana. I don't know if we can make that work. I can't call her on the phone and train her, go to a meeting, it doesn't work that way. I said, well, she said, well, just come meet Betty. And Betty had actually gone to school and learned HTML, but she only knew old-fashioned, old-school HTML. I've been teaching Betty PHP. Never, ever, ever write somebody off, ever, unless they're abusive. If they're abusive, I'm done. Anyway, every week on Friday, Betty and I have a session for 2 hours, and we go through code in their child theme, and I explain to her CS principles through what she's doing. She's learned about database, she's learned about function calls, she's learned about parameters, she's learned about objects, and she's learned all of that even though she has this terrible disability. She can't even leave her house without somebody taking her because she can't drive. And it's so amazing until a burglar stole all of her adaptive equipment. Every bit of it. Yeah, I think there's a special place in hell for people that would do that. They stole our computers, they stole everything. So you just never know when you're speaking at a conference who's going to walk up to you and what they're going to ask you. What you do want to do is avoid a few things. You want to work with people who will not suck the emotional energy out of you. I have a client who does business, human relations and business keynote speaking at conferences. She says, Nora, the world's full of nice people and I choose not to work with the other kind. She's so smart. Anyway, you want to work with somebody who asks questions instead of accusing. I had a client accuse me of not being responsive because I wouldn't disinfect his network and set up a network firewall, even though I told him I'm not an IT person. You know, it's just accuse, right? That are willing to learn, they're willing to understand the process, they're willing to work with you. They're going to treat you like a member of the team. That's what happened with this one graphic artist. She came in late, so she missed everything. So the people who owned the site weren't looking at the graphic artist and myself and them as one big team to accomplish a marketing goal. There's some things you can't help. If a web host goes bad and they lose security, that's not your fault. If they don't update their server software, that's not your fault. If the software is updated and it's not compatible with their software anymore, that's not your fault. And they need to be able to listen to you and understand that these are things you don't control, you just work with. And that's a really hard thing. It's very abstract for them. They also have to understand that there is a trial and error component. It doesn't matter how well you know technology. That's a problem. They need to follow your security practices. And if they ask for extra stuff, I stopped doing proposals. You want a proposal? Go find somebody else. Why do I not do that? Because every time I did a proposal, I ate a lot of time. Because no matter what they think, they don't understand. When they say they want a calendar, and then they want this calendar that's going to take a lot of extra work that was unexpected, I decide what that meant, installing a calendar meant. So like one graphic artist didn't, and this is the one that got everything to me late, she wanted a slider that had 3 edible text areas on it that could be linked. Well, she wanted every picture in the slider to have the text areas in a different area of the picture, because we don't cover up somebody's face, right? So, is there such a thing as a WordPress plugin that does that? I never found one. Which means that they need something where they can drag it to the place that they want it, which means a ton of coding, right? And so the graphic artist thought I could do that like in 4 days. And they couldn't pay for it. So, you know, if you have a client that understands that there's some things that aren't going to go perfect the next time, or the first time, and that sometimes things that they want take more time than what you thought. And, sorry, I talked too much and ran out of time.